joins in on the phone line. Good afternoon, Mr. Adhia. My first question is the fact that the government has announced that 40% of the capital will be allocated to the top 6 large banks, which includes something like a State Bank of India, a Bank of Baroda, PNB, etc. But sir, these are the relatively better capitalized banks. Will this 40% capital being allocated only to the top 6 banks that you've identified not hurt some of the other smaller PSU banks where the asset quality is bad, where the asset quality is weaker than the others, where the provisioning requirement is a lot higher?
Well, we have already mentioned in our press release that the entire capital is going to be divided into 3 different corpuses. One is the corpus which will go 40% corpus, that is about 10,000 crore will go to those banks which are requiring some kind of a capital support because they are on the margin. Although I must mention that all the banks are more than adequately capitalized as per the Basel norms, but there are some banks where the margin, the buffer is little less, and we would like them to give a small buffer also so that they can confidently make provisions if they are to be made for whatever impaired assets are there. So the first tranche of 10,000 crore is going to almost all the banks except those which are stronger banks. And in the second tranche, 10,000 crore, it will be specifically given to the more efficient, larger banks where they can meet with the credit requirement of the economy more efficiently, and also they can make themselves stronger. So this is the strategy this year of capital allocation. And the third tranche of about 5,000 crore, that is about 20%, will be linked to some kind of a performance measurement, which is in the first 9 months. What is it that the banks have done to improve their quality of assets and to reduce their gross NPAs? Now, this is the third tranche which will come in the last quarter of the year. The remaining 2 tranches would be finalized as early as possible, and they would be given to the banks.
So, okay, Mr. Adhia, when will the first tranche be disbursed?
The first and the second tranche both would be released together as early as possible, as soon as we get the approval from Parliament for supplementary demand, and as soon as we are ready to release the money.
Okay, Mr. Adhia, what is the minimum threshold that you will of capitalization that you want to see in all the public sector banks? At the moment, most of them are, as you said, above 7%. Yeah. You want them to come up to 8, 7.5? What is the number you have in mind?
To bring them to 8%, if possible, the common equity only. I'm not talking about the tier 1 capital in total. I'm only talking about common equity, the CET1 capital. Okay. So the common equity capital, we would like to bring as many of them as possible to 8%. But definitely each one of them, we will make some projections of how much provisioning they will have to make this year. And after making those provisions for impaired assets, end of FY16, they should have in their balance sheet minimum 7.5% of common equity. Now, this is our target.
Okay. Mr. Adhia, a number of bank chairmen and MDs have also been, the names are doing the rounds. When will we get to hear the final appointments?
Well, as soon as possible. We are not trying to delay it even by a day. We are trying our best, and we will announce them as soon as they are finalized.
So within a week, 2 weeks, 1 month?
I can't put a time limit to it because it is a process in government and it takes some time. Right?
Okay. So I just wanted to ask you about the impaired assets. All the numbers that have been announced so far, the bad loans are only increasing with a large number of the public sector banks having bad loans above 5%. And this is not counting a lot of assets which have still been refinanced. Is there any package or any extraordinary measure that the government is thinking of to ensure that the NPLs are brought down?
Well, we are trying our best to look at the sector-wise projects. We are trying to identify what the problems are, what the bottlenecks are, and we are trying to work with the ministries concerned, with banks and as well as the promoters, project promoters, to see to it how we can remove some of these snags. Now, that is the only strategy that can work. I don't think there is any drastic solution that can be given for this kind of a problem. So we are trying our best to have reviews at every level and to talk to all the stakeholders in order to find solutions.
Yeah, there are suggestions by some investors. For instance, in steel, there are analyst reports written which suggest that there isn't enough demand for so much steel, especially because there is cheap steel coming. So is there any special measures designed for the steel sector, or at least some process underway?
We have already discussed the steel sector issues also, and everything is in the process now. And I don't think we are ready yet for making any announcement.
Okay. And in power sector, that was another thing which the RBI had flagged in its annual report. Is there any conversation with the SEBs and the state governments so that the state electricity boards' revenues are higher than their expenditure? In many cases, the expenditure is more than the revenue.
Absolutely. We are in touch with the Power Ministry. The Minister of Power had held meetings on this. We are trying to also now start some process of talking to the various states, particularly those 3 or 4 FRP states where the position is not so good, and very shortly I think those dialogues will start with the states.
Okay. Will the banks be asked to do some forbearance? Will RBI be asked to extend forbearance for 1 more year or 2 more years?
I don't think there is any such blanket forbearance that anybody is asking for, but banks have been making usual issues with RBI about some of those regulatory requirements, and RBI will look at it,
No, I'm asking you because when the package was announced in FY13, banks were told that they have to fund losses till FY15. And from FY15 onwards, they don't have to fund losses.
Absolutely.
But Rajasthan is asking for funding of losses.
No, that is not going to happen, That is not a possibility at all.
Okay.
That is not a possibility.
Okay. So when will we get something from the power sector in terms of the state governments either recapitalizing the SEBs or the SEBs paying? I mean, even today we spoke to NHPC and they have about 1,500, 1,600 receivables from a lot of SEBs. When can we hear the first steps from the central government in terms of better payment for the power companies?
Well, as I told you, we have to start talking to the state governments now and also the distribution companies of the state government. And then Power Ministry is already working on this. And hopefully, as and when we have finished our dialogue, we'll be able to give some results out of it.
Can you give us some timeline, sir? Because the assets, the more they wait, the more the loans balloon, especially in steel. When can we hear? If you can give us some timeline?
We are not losing any time. Let me be very frank with you. We are not losing a single day in trying to solve our problems, and we are working with each of the sector. But it's very difficult for me to define a time limit when there are so many stakeholders involved. All I can say is that our efforts are very sincere, and we are trying our best.
Okay. There were some suggestions that some steel companies which are extremely unviable should be allowed to die so that the others survive. Will you go as drastic as that?
I don't think that kind of a solution works anywhere. I don't think so. That kind of a solution is not a right solution.
Okay. So it will be a combination of import tariffs being raised. Is that the way you will work?
No, as I told you, we are not yet ready with any kind of announcement on this, right? So we can't do any, we can't make surmises on it.
Okay.
Right.
All right. Just to come back to the banks, when will the bank boards be reconstituted? You were talking about governance issues and governance reforms for bank boards. When will we hear on those lines? We only heard about the chairman and MD appointments.
Yeah.
The rest of the bank board reforms, when will we hear?
There also, we are in the process of, selection of the right kind of people to go to the bank's board. And as soon as the process is complete, we would be able to announce those.
Okay. Should that be within this quarter?
Well, as I told you, in any one of these things, there are a lot of stakeholders who are to be consulted. And so I don't think I can put any time frame limit on this. We would not like to delay it even by a day.
Okay.
We will try our best to do it as early as possible.
All right, Mr. Adhia. Thank you very much for your patience, sir.